What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome to Shaw Locals Bears Insider Podcast. I am Kyle Nabors. Back with you is Sean Hammond and Hub Arkush. It is Monday morning, April 10th, guys. I just finished walking the dogs. It is gorgeous weather outside, and we've reached that time period here where it really starts to feel like the draft is closing in. It's past the pundits just blowing hot air. You're starting to get an idea of what draft boards look like, Hub. We're about a little more than 2 weeks away from the first round. What chatter are you hearing in league circles?
Well, you're right. We're now starting to get a better sense of what teams' boards look like. Of course, we have to have the right contacts who are comfortable telling us things that they're comfortable that we won't give away. The bottom line is that the first three quarterbacks, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, these guys are going in the top five. I don't know if they're going 1, 2, 3. I think the first two picks are definitely going to be quarterbacks. Everybody seems to be focusing in, for the most part on Bryce Young as the first overall pick. I still don't understand that. I don't really trust a 5'10" quarterback. Other than that, he does have, all the other skills that everybody's looking for in the number one quarterback and the number one pick. And it looks like it's going to go that way. It looks like Stroud will go number 2. What happens at 3 and 4? Maybe the first edge rusher goes at 3. But the bottom line is that I think we know all 4 of those quarterbacks. The kid from Kentucky, Will Levis, is going in the first round too. And I don't see him from people I'm talking to. I'm not sure he goes before number 9. Obviously, our focus today is, how many picks can we save for the Bears at number 9, assuming they don't trade it. And 3 of those quarterbacks are going to go, and that's good because none of them would go to the Bears. Whether Levis goes before the Bears pick or not, I don't know.
Sean, yeah, what are you hearing? What's the chatter from Bears fans and around Hallis Hall right now with the way this is shaping up?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bears, a lot of the folks I've talked to, at least in terms of just people, Bears fans and the folks following, want to see that scenario that Hub was just talking about, where if there's still a quarterback on the board, they could potentially trade down and acquire some more assets for that number 9 pick. That kind of is not kind of, it definitely is determinant on whether there's a team willing to move up and get that guy. But you look at the Bears at 9 and the Eagles are next at number 10. I mean, if somebody wants to trade up, those are 2 teams who are definitely going to be willing to make a move to go back down. It comes down to whether the Bears, value whoever is still on the board. We need to see who exactly is still there. You're talking about 3 quarterbacks going almost for sure before the Bears pick, and that means that some really good defenders are going to drop down. Some really good offensive linemen are still going to be there. So those are the decisions that the Bears are going to have to weigh here as the draft nears.
You look at either 3 or 4 quarterbacks gone. I was thinking about this while walking the dog this morning. You look at 3 or 4 quarterbacks gone. Will Anderson gone. Witherspoon out of Illinois looks likely to be gone before number 9. You start putting this together, and Sean, Sean mentioned Hub needing a partner to be able to trade down. But the way this is setting up, and we know the Bears, despite the fact that I think all 3 of us agree they've had a good offseason, they've done a good job filling holes. They still have a lot of positions of need on this roster. They can go multiple ways in this first round. And with the way this draft board seems to be setting up, Hub, if they can find a partner, like I said, when I was thinking about it this morning, it just makes all the sense in the world to be able to trade down a little bit still.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. And I think Sean just made a great point, which is that the key with Levis is if there's some team, that 4th quarterback team or 3rd quarterback team, likes him more than others, that could be your best target, whoever that may be. If you go back and check history, guys, you're not going to find a lot of first-round picks that are traded for other than a quarterback. It happens, but it's just not as common. And so that would be the best situation if Levis or Richardson were still on the board. that would put the Bears in good shape. And I don't know anybody who'd have a problem with the Bears trading down again. You have to go down, 4 or 5 spots or more if you're talking about getting another first-round pick. But if you'd be happy with a couple twos, which I would be happy with because that's still, high value, I think it's certainly worth considering for the Bears. But the way this is shaping up now is, there's really a couple guys, actually Gonzalez, the other cornerback besides Witherspoon. If either one of them were still there, somebody could trade up for one of those two. You're just not going to get as much in a trade up for that. But it is what you want to keep an eye on. I think the way this is developing, Sean, is that, and it frustrates me because I've been pretty outspoken about who I think the Bears should take at number 9, and nobody agrees with me, which is not unusual for me. But I don't think there's going to be any offensive linemen off the board in the first 9 picks. Just the way this looks to be developing. And I don't see the Bears' need at offensive line as great as most do, but many do. And they, given the option of taking the best offensive lineman in the draft at number 9, it looks like it could be shaping up. That's the most likely scenario.
Yeah, it certainly could be. And even that's best case scenario. If you're looking for a lineman, only one lineman gone isn't a bad scenario either. It kind of comes down to, Hub, who do they think is that best lineman? And I'm curious your take on Peter Skaronski. Is he the best lineman in this draft? And does it matter if it's a guard or a tackle? I know there's some debate about where exactly Skaronski could fit for a team.
Well, I think it absolutely matters. And I think it is a clear historic fact that tackles are harder to find than guards. And most of the people I'm talking to do agree. Everybody agrees that Skaronski is going to be a really good NFL player. This is what's difficult, at least for me. I don't know if you guys struggle with this. Is anytime I say something that isn't what people want to hear, I feel like I'm downgrading the player, and I'm not at all. I'm just trying to put them where they belong. I mean, being a first-round pick, whether you're 7 or 17, is still a big deal. And Peter Skaronski is going to be a very good NFL player. I absolutely think he's going to be a guard, and I absolutely think that diminishes his draft value a little bit. And I also just don't like him as much as Paris Johnson, and that's hard for me to say an Ohio State kid is the best offensive lineman in the draft, but that's just a fact as I see it. And the teams I'm talking to, guys, it's interesting. It's probably 50-50. The Bears are not the only team that thinks Skaronski is the best offensive lineman, but it's about 50-50, maybe a slight edge, I think, towards Johnson. And again, the fact that he clearly is a tackle. And so I think that may be the way this comes down. And, we can play with these mock drafts all we want. I know they're fun. I think they're kind of silly because, most of us don't know exactly what 32 teams draft boards look like. But my best guess would be that if the Bears go offensive lineman, they'd get the best one on the board, on their board, and that's a good thing. And my suspicion is that it's Johnson. But what makes this complicated is we know how much Ryan Poles loves the local guys. He's made there's no quiet about it. You look what they've done so far. And so I think that's why so many people on these mock drafts that I'm seeing have Skaronski going to the Bears.
Let me rephrase that question really quick, Kyle, before we get off the topic. Hub, do you think teams see Skaronski as a tackle, or is that more of a media narrative at this point?
Oh, no, there's no question. He can play tackle. He just did for 3 years and did it very, very well, in a pretty good football conference. But he is built like a guard, and he performs more like a guard. And I would say of the teams I've talked to, I'm going to guess it's at least 70% have said they see him at guard. Okay. There's only one team I've talked to that thinks he's the best tackle prospect in the draft, hands down. They definitely think he's a top 15 pick, but he's more of a natural guard in the NFL than he's going to be a tackle.
This is a conversation that I'm really happy we dove into. I didn't, came in saying we talked quarterback to start. We will get back to that. But quickly before we do, Hub, you mentioned us having our mock drafts up. That is If you go to shawlocal.com, you will find Hub's first mock draft, Sean's first mock draft up there for the first round. Available now. If you are watching live on YouTube, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel, tell a friend, leave a comment, help people find the show. It's been great to see the channel growing and everyone already this morning. A lot of questions and comments coming in. We're gonna get to it as many as we can. If we don't get to it right away, throw it back in the chat. I promise we'll try and get to it over the next hour or so here. And of course, follow us on Twitter at Kyle Nabors, at Sean_Hammond, at Hub_Arkush. And you can find us on our main Twitter account at Bears_Insider. All of our content gets posted there. And you guys bringing up Peter Skaronski and the talk of him maybe being a bit undersized. A guy that I've fallen in love with while reading up on the draft and looking at some tape on the exact opposite end, and Paris Johnson's teammate at Ohio State. He's not going to be a first-round prospect, but he's probably going to be a day 2 pick. DeJuan Jones is a just absolute mountain of a man. And I bring it up because a frequent guest on the YouTube channel here in the comments, a good friend of mine, might be, you're mentioned here if you're a regular listening to the show. We're texting over the weekend, I believe, and he was talking about we were talking about the size and the Bears wanting their linemen to be athletic, and you get into this debate of what's too big or what's too small, and we were at the end of the day, like, do you throw that out of the window a little bit if you think someone like Peter Skaronski or someone like DeJuan Jones is a special talent that maybe transcends their size a little bit, Hub? And like, how do you make that determination as a scout in the front office?
Well, obviously it's each general manager does it a little differently. And by the way, let me throw one thing in real quickly here. The first thing I'm doing when we sign off today is reading Sean's mock draft. Mm-hmm. And I purposely didn't read it until I did finish mine, because I didn't want to risk any, similarities or any we're saying the same thing. Now, we may have picked all the same guys. I don't know. But that's what I'm going to be doing, because I want to see.
Mine was about 2 weeks ago now, and I'm second guessing everything. I'm ready for my second one.
Well, exactly. So that's the other reason that I'm not as big as most on my. They're fun. They're fun to look at. Yeah. It gives people a sense of what we're hearing. But everybody needs to remember, we work hard at this. We talk to a lot of teams. We have good information. We don't make picks. And so it's a lot easier for us, to pick a guy with a certain team just based on need as opposed to talent. And that's where you have to be careful. But I think the answer on Skaronski is that the bigger concern about him than his size, he's big enough, it's his arm length. It's those short arms. That's what everybody keeps talking about. And that is a bigger concern on the left side than it is on the right side. And the other thing, I just don't understand why people are so adamant that the Bears need a left tackle when last year's 5th-round pick was all rookie at left tackle. And I think Braxton Jones should stay there. I hear them talking about moving him to right tackle, which I don't understand, because he doesn't. You want if you're going with size, you want it on the right side. And I think he belongs at left tackle. I think the Bears could get much better at right tackle, and there's no problem with them taking one in the first round. But I love number 2 from Ohio State. And as a matter of fact, if we had done a mock second round, he'd be my Bears pick. I've talked to a couple teams over the weekend, actually, who've told me they don't think he's going to be there in the 50s. That's how well he is thought of. That's the problem. This is where the Claypool trade just is going to haunt us forever, unless he becomes what Ryan Poles thought he was going to be when he made the trade. Because not that number 1 pick in the second round, it's like having a third first-round pick. And I would rather be sitting there at 33 right now than 53 or 55.
See, it's actually, you say that, Miami forfeiting the first-round pick. Yeah. Actually, number 32. So, it is a first-round pick essentially this year.
Let's be fair to Claypool. He wasn't healthy. He hasn't had his chance yet to be a Chicago Bear. He was a highly, thought of prospect coming out of school. Didn't do much his first couple. Well, I shouldn't say didn't do much. Didn't do as much as anybody expected his first couple of years. But having made the trade for Moore, I think the Bears have got plenty at wide receiver now. It's a position I've taken off the board in the first couple rounds. It's why offensive line continues to make sense. But as far as Skaronski, there's no way he's still on the board at 15, 16, maybe even 14. It just feels high at 9 because he is more likely a guard than a tackle. And an answer to the question, which I went away from 10 minutes ago, is that, yeah, teams absolutely feel that you can do better at guard in the later rounds. Whereas if you're going for that Pro Bowl tackle, go make your pick in the first round.
Kyle, I'm glad you brought up DeJuan Jones, because my question with him is, yes, he's a mountain of a man. He's a huge dude. And man, you watch those Senior Bowl videos and it's like nobody can touch him. I wonder, if he's exactly what Ryan Poles is looking for, though, in terms of linemen who can move. How is he in space? How will he perform in the scheme that they're trying to run with that big body? Not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying that that's what Ryan Poles sort of has to figure out. Is he, can they make it work with Jones and the scheme?
And that's where I guess I'm seeing some people chime in here, and I'm interested to find out with DeJuan Jones. Just because he's a big guy doesn't mean that he can't move.
Doesn't mean he can't move. You're right, Kyle. Absolutely.
And just I don't feel like I'm smart enough. Like, I'm not a good enough eye to be like, oh yeah, that guy can't play in this scheme. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm really interested to see how NFL teams are going to evaluate him, because I knew Mike probably was lurking in here. He said, Jonathan Ogden was 6'9", about 340 pounds, but he would be too big for the Bears scheme, right? But like, Jonathan Ogden came into the league, what was that, about 2002? Was it even earlier than that, Hub?
Yeah,
a lot. Yeah. So, I mean, the league's changed a lot, but I get what Mike is trying to say there. But, I also say, like, Jonathan Ogden and DeJuan Jones aren't exactly the same player. DeJuan Jones might be a much better athlete at his age than, Jonathan Ogden was coming in the league. You don't get players, a lot of guys this size, that you do hear teams. Hub, you mentioned that you're hearing people saying that he might not be there in the 50s. There are teams that are really high on this kid.
Well, and the reason, guys, is pretty simple. He was great at Ohio State. Now we're focusing on his size because it's so unusual and trying to make it, we're not trying to make it a negative, but assuming, maybe it could be a negative because it would impact his speed. Watch some tape of this guy. He is a really good right tackle. There's a reason that teams are telling me he could go at the end of the first round. He's going to go early in the second round. He may not be there in the 50s. He's a really good football player, and so, what we're really doing is focusing too much on his size. It didn't trouble him or impact him at Ohio State. There's a reason he's going to be one of the top 50 players taken, or top 55, or whatever it may be. And his size, it really, the scouts I'm talking to view it more as a bonus than a concern. It's he's not too big to be athletic enough to be good enough. And so that I would rule out. He clearly is a right tackle. He's not a left tackle. That's a limitation for some teams. You look at Braxton Jones and everybody can't decide. Is he better on the left or better on the right? Obviously, they think he could be pretty good in both places. You don't have that with him. If you draft him, you're drafting a right tackle, but you need two. You need one on each side, And by the way, size is much less. Well, that's why people see him as a right tackle, I guess. It's much less of a concern on the right side as the left side. The more athletic pass rushers are on the left side. The guys who are going to run by you or run over you, they got to run over you on the right side. You're not going to do that with this kid.
Let's go back up to the top and talk about DeJuan Jones's teammate, because Paris Johnson is my favorite lineman in this draft, Hub. And let's go back first off before we get into Paris Johnson. And you had already talked about the best pick for the Bears might be an offensive lineman at 9. But let's go back to that quarterback talk that we wanted to get into at the beginning. And let's first get an update, because one thing we're waiting on before draft night, and all three of these might not get resolved before draft night, though, is Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, and Trey Lance. Those three trades, or I don't expect anything to happen with Lamar Jackson. I assume he's going to be playing in Baltimore this year. I do, expect Aaron Rodgers to move to the Jets, and this is the one that's more of a wild card to me. The biggest wild card to me, Hub, is Trey Lance. So what are you hearing about those three names, and do you expect them to be resolved before draft night or maybe on draft night?
I don't expect. Well, Rodgers, it doesn't matter if it's before or after. It's a trade, and they're not going to get a first-round pick for him. Maybe they will, but I wouldn't think so. That's clearly what's holding it up at this point. At this point, he belongs in New York. The Packers are just holding out to get the most they can. They've already drafted, they hope, their quarterback of the future. So there's nothing complicated about that one. That's just a question of who gives in first. Do the Packers want the picks this year or next year? Lamar isn't going anywhere before the draft. And I just don't know what this kid is thinking, young man. You shouldn't be. Maybe there are situations where you can do it without an agent. Maybe he's a genius. Maybe he's going to be an agent when he's done playing football in the NFL. But you can't make the deal he's trying to make right now without an agent. And that's why it's not going to happen before the draft. I mean, because there's nobody working on it except him. How many teams do you think he's talking to, guys? How many NFL teams are talking directly to Lamar Jackson and saying, well, here's the deal we could make and here's what we think and whatever? My guess would be no team has talked to him, and he has put himself in a position where he can demand a trade. But if he really wants it, he should get himself an agent to make it for him, because it's not going to happen. He's not going to get the deal he wants himself. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I wonder how stubborn he's going to be as the season draws nearer, because I agree that he's not going to get traded before the draft. He's not going to get traded on draft night. I don't necessarily think he's going to get traded at all. And so, when push comes to shove, is he going to play on the franchise tag or not? I think that's what it's going to come down to. And frankly, yeah, Hub, I mean, there's not he doesn't have much leverage left. He's kind of used up all his opportunities in requesting a trade and in tweeting out contract figures. I don't know what else he can really do other than decide to play or not.
I mean, I think his team is waiting and hoping somebody else makes him an offer. They just want somebody else to set the table for him, or at least say, this is the value. He's not getting $250 million guaranteed. That's just ridiculous, and that's obvious. He's been pretty clear that's what he wants. That's the deal. Somebody else got it, so he thinks he should get it. And that I don't think can happen. So this is just a wait and see to who caves in first, and what does he? How much guaranteed money does he need? Is the way to do this? I think that the other deal, which everybody has acknowledged was stupid, I think is the only $200 million guaranteed deal in the NFL. If they give him 200, 201, 210, I think it's too much, but maybe that's what it takes. If somebody panics and says, we got to get this done now. But I think we all agree. I think he's going to be playing in the exact same place this year he did last year, or didn't last year. The other issue is that if the kid had stayed healthy, maybe this would be a better conversation. But not only does nobody going to guarantee $250 million, but how much are you going to guarantee to a guy who hasn't played a full season in 2 years? So it's a crazy spot right now. And I don't know if he thinks that he's helping himself by holding out longer or not, but he's not helping himself at all right now.
I think it's a really good point that, yeah, he without having an agent, you're talking about a deal that is really maybe, the Deshaun Watson deal is really the only comp you can look at, and he's trying to negotiate it on his own behalf, and get other teams to bite. That's a lot to ask, particularly if a guy, as you point out, Hub, has not been able to finish each of the last two seasons. Guys,
there is nothing GMs like less than having to negotiate with a player without an agent. They may not love all the agents. They don't. But they also know that they're good at their job and that they're going to cheat. What's going to happen if he negotiates his own deal and finds out a year or two from now, because it's going to be a 5 or 6 year deal, that he made a mistake, and then he's going to be unhappy again? There's all kinds of reasons that teams don't want to negotiate directly with players. And, he's put himself in a bad spot. And, if he was smart, he would give in and go ahead, get somebody who knows what they're doing.
So I think we hit Jackson, we hit Rodgers. how about Trey Lance? Because that, as I was saying, is the biggest wild card. You heard a lot of smoke recently, or reading a lot, and I don't know if there's anything actually coming in NFL circles, or this is more pundits. But a lot of talk with Tennessee maybe being involved. I've seen a little bit about Atlanta. Do you expect Trey Lance to be moved?
Again, he's not Lamar Jackson, obviously, and so now you're talking about a different deal. I'm not talking about just the money. I'm talking about what you'd have to give for him, and how expensive this gets. You don't hear, when teams are talking about, I want to go get a franchise quarterback, I don't hear Trey Lance all that often, good football player,
Well, I don't ask because of that. It's more if the Tennessee Titans were to give up let's say it takes a second round pick to get Trey Lance at this point. Well, that's just one team that isn't coming up to trade with the Bears for that number 9 pick, so that's why I'm interested in and wondering, or if you think a Trey Lance deal is in the cards before draft night or on draft night.
I think that what's different about that one is it makes more sense before draft night, because then they have options to make their decision as what they're doing at the position, but the question is, again, what is he worth? What are you getting? And are you getting better at the position? Have you given up on him? You can't win with him. Do you have to replace him? That's really I think that's the bigger answer. Is he worth keeping? Not is he worth trading? Is he worth keeping? I think that's the part that the teams aren't sure about right now.
I still think that the 49ers ultimately are going to want to see Trey Lance and Brock Purdy sort of duke it out for this starting job. And you really haven't seen a whole lot of this guy on the field. I know they get to see him every day in practice for the last 2 years. Well, not really the last 2 years, because he spent all the last year injured, but for much of the previous year. But I think it'd have to be a really good offer for the 49ers to consider giving up that quickly, having just seen him for a couple of starts.
Kyle, everybody I've talked to out there says they like him. They don't think they made a mistake, and nobody saw Purdy coming. That's the other part of it, that and he cannot be anointed off of, what was it, 7 games? I think 5 in the regular season, the playoffs, whatever. Played very well. There's no question about that. He's interesting. He's intriguing. But even having seen those games now, I'm not sure that it's clear that he's a clear choice over Lance. Lance was drafted to be the guy. That was who they made their commitment to. Purdy's the last pick in the draft, and so the fact that it worked out well is nice. But I think they got to keep Lance and give him a chance to win the position, at least, if nothing else.
I'm not saying that Brock Purdy is going to turn it into it, but I completely understand the point you're making there. I think of some of the I think Matt Flynn. You remember Matt Flynn having the little hot streak in Green Bay, and then Seattle making the trade for him. Who was the Patriots? I'm not referencing Jimmy G. There was it Matt Castle? Is that the name that I'm thinking of?
Name rings a bell, yeah.
that had a little run, and it was, they were able to turn him into something at a small sample size. And so what I'm getting at there is, yeah, Brock Purdy was, I believe, Mr. Irrelevant last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, you're talking about a 7th round draft pick, very small sample size. That is not someone, if you are the San Francisco 49ers who have Super Bowl aspirations, that you're ready to just absolutely hitch your wagon to, I would think, right?
Well, let's be fair to Purdy. I mean, he didn't just survive; he played really well.
No, I'm not taking anything away from him.
I know you're not. I did, I think, and I'm trying to not do that. I mean, I'm not trying to belittle the guy. If he doesn't get hurt in the NFC Championship game, what happens? My suspicion was the Eagles were the better team, and it probably works out the same way. But we wouldn't be having this conversation if he had not gotten hurt and gone to the Super Bowl. Then I can tell you that, yes, Lance, they'd probably be trying to get the best pick they could for him now, but that didn't happen. And that's not Purdy's fault, but it does put him in a slightly different situation, and Lance is still, quote, the better prospect. And clearly the 49ers, want to contend for a Super Bowl again this year. They may have the best defense in the league again this year. They think that they're there. And my guess is that even though they haven't seen him on the field in regular season or playoff games, that they still think that there's 50-50, if not better chance that he's going to be the starting quarterback this year.
Sean, I like this comment from Kawhi. Imagine Fields in San Francisco right now. Oh my God. For all the Bears fans who are watching this, I'm sure they're very happy that scenario didn't play out. But yeah, Justin Fields with that current roster in San Francisco would be
they could have had him there at 3. They could have had him there. So yeah, I mean that would be scary. I imagine. I don't think Bears fans like hearing that, but I don't know. It was just rotten luck with Trey Lance last year and that injury. I mean, we really haven't gotten to see him, and it sucks the way that what was that week 2 when he broke his ankle, I think it was, and I think the 49ers can feel pretty good about having Lance and Purdy and knowing one of those guys is going to step up and help them win games.
I think probably the way they're going to look at it, guys, is that going into this season with both of them and seeing what Purdy did when he had to play, they probably feel best about their chances of winning a Super Bowl. It just how they get better by trading Lance. If Purdy ends up being the guy and he's their franchise quarterback, I don't think they're going to get any less for Lance next year than this year. So I'm just not sure why now is the time to make that move, and if they saw enough to be comfortable doing it.
And I think maybe they learned some lessons from last year too, when everyone thought they were going to trade Jimmy G, and they wound up needing him for the whole season practically.
Yeah, and it's not like you're in a situation. Part of the reason the Jimmy G thing was fueled so much was because of the contract, thinking that they can move on from that and get rid of that. But you don't have that situation when it comes to the Trey Lance thing. Yeah. So that Gary Ross chiming in here with Matt Castle caused the Bears to get Cutler. I don't quite remember. I kind of remember what he's referencing there, but Gary, I'm actually a little interested. Chime in there in the comments. Let us know. So let's go over here and talk about Jalen Carter. Rico Beard in the comments here with, if Detroit gets Jalen Carter, I'm scared. We should be scared. Had seen another comment asking about an update on Jalen Carter and the Bears. I know since the last time we had a stream, guys, Jalen Carter has been to Hallis Hall and met with Bears front office personnel. Hub, I'll start with you. What are you hearing in league circles and how teams are evaluating Jalen Carter now?
Jalen Carter was the number 1 player in this draft, according to the majority of teams that I was able to communicate with. Now we're going back to January and February, and he still is. He hasn't become less of a defensive tackle. He hasn't become a worse player. The problem, what I'm hearing talking to folks, is that if anything, he has slipped further since the combine rather than improved his draft. He just isn't acting the way teams would like him to act. You've heard now that he's gained weight, that he wasn't in shape when he surprised everybody and showed up at the combine after not being there the first couple of days. I think it's great that they theoretically have solved his legal issues, by his, making the deal that he made. That part of it isn't a concern, but you do worry about, what his attitude is going to be, what his approach to the game is, what he's going to be like in the locker room. I'm not saying he's a bad kid. I have no reason to believe that, but the teams I'm talking to have told me that they're more concerned about maturity, probably is the best word to use. They're, if anything, they're a little bit more concerned about him now with what they've seen and learned since the combine than they were when all this, when the story went crazy.
I'm interested now. It's been a couple of weeks. If everyone in chat too, throw in there, how is everyone kind of evaluating Jalen Carter? I think most people, Sean, when we did this a couple of weeks ago, or I should say the majority, were kind of against taking him at 9 because of the unknowns. I was thinking about it earlier again, and you look at the edge rushers that are going to be available at the Bears at 9. Assuming Will Anderson's gone, you got to assume Will Anderson's gone. I don't see any world where he's not, right?
No, he's gone.
Yeah, he's gone.
Forget it.
But there is a chance Jalen Carter is there at 9, and I think there's, from an on-field perspective, there's no way you can say that Jalen Carter is not a higher upside with a more known. I feel like you have a better feeling about his ceiling. You know what I'm saying? Than any of those edge rushers. Like, can you pass on that type of talent for someone like Lucas Van Ness? That is a lot more of another kid with a high ceiling, but a bigger bust potential for his on-field stuff.
Kyle, Jalen Carter, the mental stuff is part of his evaluation. When you talk about where he fits, it is a real concern as to what kind of pro he's going to be, what kind of player he's going to be. And you can't, and let's not forget what happened to Ryan Poles in his first year as GM. I don't think he wants somebody else being arrested or getting in trouble, that he drafts or signs as a free agent. He's going to be a little more careful, I would think. And that again, we got to be fair here. That's not to say that Jalen Carter is going to, have trouble or there's more coming, but you can't ignore what's happened. And then more importantly, and this is again where I think you have to be careful, because the key is getting the best football player. It's not getting the right position. But Jalen Carter is not an edge rusher. He's a defensive tackle, and they've already committed a defensive tackle in free agency. It's not anywhere near as great a need as improving the pass rush. And I don't know, again, I've been adamant about it. You take the best player. And if you believe Jalen Carter is the best player and you trust him, you take him. And he is certainly one of the 2 or 3 best players. Whether you can trust him or not, I don't know. But you don't not take him because he's not an edge rusher. But if there is an edge rusher who you have, evaluated very similarly to him, then I think you have to take the edge rusher. I just don't see Jalen Carter as a natural fit with the Bears, based on everything we know about him.
I think if Tyree Wilson is there, that's the pick. Personally, that's my opinion. Whether even if Skaronski's there, even if Paris Johnson's there, I think you get Tyree Wilson. I don't know if he's going to be there. I'm seeing a lot of folks predicting 2 edge rushers off the board before the Bears pick. You have to just wait and see on that. But I would have no problem passing on Jalen Carter for any of these guys. I don't really care. I think that there's just too many questions around this guy. There's too many concerns about off the field stuff and whether he's going to be the right fit for what you're trying to build in the locker room. And so for that reason, I would have no problem seeing the Bears pass on him.
If I could just add one more thing, well, I guess I'm not adding one more thing. I'm repeating what I said in a different way. If I'm Ryan Poles, I've had a really good year so far. I think not that he cares, but or should care, but he is getting really positive reviews with the trade of the first round pick, with the moves that he has made in free agency, that they seem to be, well planned, great fits. He's doing all the things he wants to do. He could risk his entire offseason if he takes Jalen Carter and the kid turns out to be a problem, and that's got to be in his mind. I'm not saying it's nagging him, but it's got to be in his mind. Every team has to be careful with Jalen Carter based on, it wasn't a big deal, the 3 players who had their off the field issues, but it happened and we talk about it. If it happens again this year with your first pick, I don't think he wants any part of that. Now maybe he's gutsy and he doesn't care and he's going to go get the talent and this kid's going to be the next Dan Hampton, because that's the comparison. I'm sure you guys have heard this at some point, but Dan Hampton is the only guy in the history of the league to be a Pro Bowler at defensive end and defensive tackle. And that's what you're hoping Jalen Carter can be for you, because that's what you need. You don't just need a pure defensive tackle. And if that's what he is, then you're not doing anything to improve your pass rush.
And I know Jalen Carter is from a football perspective, he's the best tackle in this draft, but there's some options there in round 2 as well. I know you're not getting the same level of player necessarily, the same upside as far as on the field, but it's not like there aren't other defensive tackles who are promising in this draft. And so I feel like you can feel okay with passing on him if that's a priority for you. You can still get somebody a little bit further down.
I'll say personally, I have said this before. Like if they took Jalen Carter at 9, I couldn't blame them for it. I think the kid is a tremendous talent. That he's a type of player that can anchor a defense for the next 5, 6, 8 years. I see every reason also that they would pass on him even if he did fall to 9. I'll get to this comment from Alan Dunlap here in a second because I think it's a good point. I do think the one name that is comparable, so Will Anderson, again, gone, right? The other edge rusher, as Sean, you mentioned him, Tyree Wilson. Hub, I know you like him. You've heard a lot of teams talking about him flying up draft boards. Give away one nugget here in your first mock draft. You have him going at number 5 to Seattle. So would be off the board to the Bears at number 9. If he was to be there at number 9, I think that would be a slam dunk pick for Ryan Poles for what this team needs. If he's off the board, if Jalen Carter is off the board, or they just don't want to deal with it, Alan with this comment, and we're talking again, you need 2 to tango here, but Alan saying if edge rusher is the bigger need and there isn't value at 9, can Bears drop down and still get someone like Van Ness or Nolan Smith? I know the last time the three of us were together, we talked about Nolan Smith out of Georgia. You can't really go wrong taking defenders from Georgia, we said. I think that would be great. Like if the Bears could drop down in that, 15, 16 range and still get someone like Nolan Smith, which I do think is a possibility. It's just, can you find someone willing to come up and take number 9 for you at that point?
Well, that's a question of, is that fourth quarterback still there? That's the most important part. There's other guys, and whether Levis, I don't know as much about Levis. I happen to love, Anthony Richardson. I think he's probably going to be the best of the 4. And he's the one that nobody can seem to make up their mind about because he's undeveloped. He hasn't played as much. But if all 4 are off the board, then I don't see that pick being as tradable for the Bears. And there's one other thing, guys, that we haven't talked about, which is that as much as Weatherspoon is an Illinois kid and everybody wants to see him go, top 5, top 7, he's a great football player. There are teams that have Christian Gonzalez rated higher. And there is a very good chance that one of them could be available at number 9. And it's a position you can pass at number 9. But it's a quality player you can't, and I'm not. I love them both. I think they're both going to be Pro Bowl cornerbacks in the NFL. But 9 is not a bad spot to be in. I got to say it once. Can't get through one of our live streams without saying it. I think that Bijan Robinson is going to be the Rookie of the Year. I think he's probably going to go to half a dozen Pro Bowls. I would absolutely take him at number 9, especially with the Chicago Bears tradition and history, with Walter Payton and the possibilities there. That's just a kind of a surprise love affair I've had with a kid from, Texas, who I think is going to be a great, great football player. But it goes to what is the most important part here, whether it's a running back, whether it's a cornerback, if it is an offensive tackle, if it is an edge rusher, who do the Bears have rated as the highest player on the board if they're still picking at number 9? That to me is the most important thing. That Ryan Poles takes that player is what I believe is Ryan's focus right now. Is they're trying to figure out, they're trying to. I don't know if they're blues or oranges or whatever colors they're using. We've heard that story, but at the end of the day, whoever is the highest rated player on their board, regardless of position. We keep talking about, do you take an edge rusher? Do you take an offensive lineman? No, you take a future Pro Bowler. That's what you're looking for. And who do they have rated there? That's what Sean and I are going to be doing everything we can to find out more about in the next couple of weeks. We may find out a little bit. They're only going to tell us so much. But if you talk to the right guys and ask the right questions, maybe we can find out a little bit more for you.
Guys, Adam Schefter tweeted about 15 minutes ago. Nothing earth-shattering here, but 6 teams have inquired with the Cardinals about trading up for that number 3 pick. So, I mean, in theory, you're talking about 6 teams who I would imagine are looking at these, taking a hard look at these quarterbacks. If you're talking about a team trading up for number 3, why couldn't all 4 of these quarterbacks go before the Bears pick. I mean,
I
I don't think that's going to happen, but it certainly could play out that way.
I will throw this out here, Hub. I know you mentioned it last time on the live stream. I don't think it is a given that Houston takes the quarterback at number 2. Like, I think there's a 10%, 15% chance that pick is Will Anderson.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, and Adam does an excellent job, but if you think about what Sean just read, 6 teams have inquired. I'm 99% sure I know who 2 of those teams are. And the reason I mentioned 2 is because those 2 are thinking about Anderson. They're not thinking about the third quarterback. That's what's fun about this is that so many different things can happen. It is. It's not only possible. It depends on, again, it's where Richardson is the most interesting because nobody knows what to make of him, but if he goes 2 or 3, and that could happen, that changes everything, because then some team that thought Levis was better, or certainly some team that thought CJ Stroud was better, now other teams are interested in making moves. It's all in what order they go. The only thing that seems to be locked in at this point, it's not a guarantee, but I know there's 2 teams I've been told would take Stroud over Young, but Young appears to be now nailed down as the number 1 overall pick for the Panthers. That's the only thing that we're kind of not reasonably sure about right now.
I want to go back to a couple names that Hub was saying, or a couple things that Hub was saying about pick number 9 that I want to make sure we hit on. One, the cornerbacks. It's an idea that, Sean, I've really warmed up to over the last week or so. Like, that obviously the Bears have put a lot of resources into that secondary in the draft in recent years. Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, not to mention Jaquan Brisker at the safety position. But while I like what I've seen from Kyler Gordon, we've seen him play a lot in the nickel spot. I don't think if the Bears have Devon Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez, as Ryan Poles has talked about 7 or 8 blue chip players in this draft, if one of those 2 cornerbacks are among those 7 or 8 guys and those edge rushers are off the board, and when I'm talking about the edge rushers, Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson, I don't think cornerback would be a bad way to go.
I wouldn't hate it. I mean, it's not as big of a need as some of their other positions based on the roster right now. But if you're talking about getting a really, really good player and a guy that you're really high on, you can't really argue with that. If you get one of your top tier guys, that's a win, no matter what position. Going through these mock scenarios, especially, talking about 3 quarterbacks going before the Bears pick, or potentially 4, whatever the case may be. Cornerback is one of those spots where I feel like one of those guys could drop and could be there. I mean, I think in my first mock, I had one of those cornerbacks going all the way to the Patriots, down at 14, I think it was. And there's probably going to be an opportunity to take one of those guys. And so, it depends who you like, which one you like. I don't know that both those guys are in Ryan Pohl's top 7 blue rated prospects, but if one of them is there, I wouldn't hate it. You're making your team stronger, but it's not the number 1 need on this roster right now.
It's really, guys, it's those 2 players. I mean, Joey Porter Jr., Penn State, probably the 3rd corner taking. I can't remember exactly what I did. If it was 5 or 6. There's going to be 4 or 5 cornerbacks in the first round. There's plenty of talent at that position. But again, we're talking about top 8 players. We're talking about getting more than you should at number 9. And that group is those 2. It's either Witherspoon or Gonzalez. And I'll tell you what, the people that I'm talking to and the tape that I've watched, those 2, they're good enough. You're talking about potential special NFL cornerbacks. And if there is, 2 or even 3 edge rushers off the board, if only 3 quarterbacks have gone so far, and if you won't take Bijan Robinson, which I wish they would, it just, nobody should be unhappy if the Bears get one of those two football players, because every team I'm talking to has those two cornerbacks ranked among the top, 5, 6, 7, 8 in this draft.
All right, so we're getting near an hour. We got to get out of here soon, but I want to talk Robinson, Hub, because I'm interested here because I am kind of in your camp in terms of, like, I think Bijan Robinson I view him as a Saquon type running back in terms of potential. Now, the difference here is Saquon was drafted, I believe, 2nd overall.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen since that draft, we've seen running back and the way they're being evaluated dramatically shift in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
Najee Harris was drafted in the mid-20s, late 20s last year, or I can't even remember what year now. It's running together. But like Najee Harris 5 or 6 years ago was a guy that probably a guy taken 10, 12th overall, right? And I'm trying to show the comparison there because whether it's Bijan Robinson at 9, he is a type of talent, maybe a team at like 5 or 6 goes. He's also a type of kid because of the way NFL teams are evaluating it. Could he fall to 14, 15, 16? And is that a more palatable, if the Bears do trade back, is that a more palatable place for Bears fans? I'm asking this to the chat as well as to you, Hub. Like, if he's fallen and the Bears have traded back, do you have to at that point say, this is too good of a talent to pass up?
Yeah, I mean, it's where do you have them on your board? It's really that simple, and I don't know anybody who doesn't have them top 6, 7, 8 on their board, but there's this change in National Football League thinking these days that you can't take quarterbacks that high, mainly because they get hurt, not because they don't work out, but because how many, start 16 games, how many Walter Paytons are there? It just doesn't happen. These guys, they rarely play 17 games or 16 games, whatever you want to talk about, and that's the way the position has declined and the value of that position. But that said, to me, there's another question that nobody's asking, and I don't understand why. It's both media and fans keep talking about how do we make Justin Fields better? What do we do to convince ourselves that Justin Fields is the franchise quarterback? Do you make him better by getting a great tackle, or do you make him better by getting the best running back in the league? One of the best ways to improve Justin Fields, to make his job easier and make him more effective and make it much harder to guard against him in the passing game, is to have the best running back in the league. And so if Bijan Robinson is the player that I'm kind of convinced he is, based not on my opinion, although I've watched a bunch of tape because I love the kid, but based on the people I'm talking to, he could be the best way to improve Justin Fields this year, by having him in your running game and having the depth that you would then have at that position, the things you could do with the running game. It's, the more teams have to defend against the run, the only way they're defending against the run against the Bears now is with Fields. They're worried about stopping him. I'm not criticizing the other running backs. I'm just telling you, nobody, gets their game plan ready on Thursday by saying, we got to take away the Bears running backs. Get one of those guys, and now you make Justin Fields that much more dangerous. And that's one of the things I love about the idea of taking him if he's there at number 9.
Sean, do you have any thoughts on that?
I hear you. I just also think you got to look at these, especially when you're talking about a top 10 pick. I mean, this is a guy that you hope is going to be around for a long time. And I mean, it's pretty clear that running back position is sort of plateaus at 27, 28 years old. Yes, you might get yourself the Rookie of the Year next year. Yes, you might get yourself a Pro Bowler. The bigger concern is the long-term longevity of that guy in that position. And that's the risk that you're taking when you take a running back that high, as opposed to a tackle, as opposed to a pass rusher who, could certainly play into their 30s at a really high level.
I look at the way the draft board is shaking up. And Sean, you may have mocked him. I don't have your mock right in front of me, but you may have mocked Robinson at number 8 to Atlanta in your first.
I went a little funky, yeah. And, Atlanta is one of those teams that this last year under this new GM and new head coach, I don't know what they're doing, man. And they love running the ball, and I could absolutely see that happening.
I don't think that's crazy, but like, so I bring that up, right? You look after like the Eagles, maybe, but like, I don't think Tennessee, Texas at 12, maybe again, but like, they have so many issues in a rebuilding team. The Jets at 13 have already spent a lot at the running back position. Patriots with Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris, like Packers. To me, like if he's not taken, surprise, I'm just having a hard time finding, a absolute slam dunk fit that doesn't keep him from falling a little bit.
Guys, there's one thing that I can say with certainty. 3-4 years from now, it'll be a running league again. That's the way the NFL works. Okay, it's become all about throwing the football. The last 10 years and teams developing it, whatever. Maybe it's not 3-4 years, maybe it's 5, 6, 7 years. But the game is constantly evolving, and teams are constantly figuring out the best ways to win. One of the best running teams in the NFL this year was the Philadelphia Eagles, and they ended up in a Super Bowl. And they're talking about wanting Robinson and drafting a running back, and maybe even trade. They've got extra picks in the first round. So and we know that, in Matt Eberflus, you've got a defensive-minded coach who we know loves the idea of running the football, and it could be worth considering. But at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is if you think you see the next Walter Payton, the next, whoever you want to talk about, the greatest running backs of all time, they still have value. You cannot worry that they're not. And by the way, Bijan Robinson, I don't think has missed a game in the last 2 seasons for Texas, and there's so much about him that suggests that he could be the exception to the rule. Again, you can't predict that. Who knows what's going to happen. But Sean's absolutely right in what he's saying. This is why teams are negative about drafting running backs this high. Concerns about their health, concerns about how long they last. It's been an issue in the league. But at some point, you find a couple running backs who, in spite of that, are so good that you can't defend them. Then teams are going to start drafting them again. And the Bears may end up in a unique spot here, where, because this is the trend today in the NFL, this guy who could be the next great one could fall to 9, or even 13 or 14 or 15 if you trade down again. That's why I'm so focused on it, but that's not a given by any means, obviously.
I think. Can I respond one thing really quick, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think to turn your example on its head a little bit, Hub, the Eagles built the best rushing attack in the NFL without, they haven't drafted a first round running back in over 2 decades. And so I think you can find those guys in the second, third, on day 3. And I just don't know that it's worth it to use your really high first round pick on a running back.
And, Sean, I can't argue that point. You're absolutely right. But if you take a look, and again, I criticize these mock drafts, everybody's but Sean's and mine. But if you're looking at them and reading them, and I've looked at a lot of them besides Sean's, I explained why before. I'll be looking at it in about 10 minutes. Is that most people have the Eagles taking a running back in the first round this year. And part of that's because they have 2 picks. But I mean, but you're right. Running back has been devalued in the NFL today. And it is, a negative in wanting the Bears to do it. I just think this kid is that special kid that you don't pass.
So I'll throw this hypothetical out here. The Bears make their pick at 9. Let's say it's Tyree Wilson. He falls, they take Tyree Wilson at 9, guys. At what point, if Robinson is still on that board, right? At what point are you screaming at the TV screen or wherever you're at Ryan Poles to pick up a phone and as Robinson falls down a draft board to go up and get him? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, another team go up and get him?
Yeah. No, I'm saying the Bears have picked at 9, right? If we're talking about, and I agree with you. Like, I do think he is a special talent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, 4 or 5 years ago, he's probably a top 5 pick. But if he's falling into the mid-teens, down towards 15, 16, at what point, Hub, are you saying it's worth taking a risk and mortgaging a bit of your future for that type of talent?
I'm not. And nobody, you haven't heard anybody who loves him more than I do. But
that's what I wanted to see.
But no, what I think Ryan Poles has done an outstanding job of so far is understanding that he is trying to rebuild an entire roster. He's trying to rebuild an entire football team. He's done a great job of acquiring assets and value, and rebuilding doesn't get done in 1 year. And there are so many things that have to be fixed. I'm not giving up the second, third, or another first round pick. And I don't know what it would take to trade up to get Robinson. But if he's there at 9 and you pass him, I think you made your decision, because now you got to go the other way. They've got some talents at running back, and you can find them in the 3rd round, which they did. You can find them in the 5th round, and so no, I would not. If I don't take him at 9, I'm not trading up to go get him. I've already made my decision.
I ask because that's how weird running back feels at this point. Like, I could see Robinson surprise off the board at number 6. I could see him shocking us sitting there at number 20. Like, it's so weird right now with the way running backs are being valued.
It's a walking contradiction. Yeah, like it's hard to know. I don't see Ryan Poles certainly doing that, and I don't think I would either. Going back to what you were saying about the trade up, I don't care if he's there in the late 20s. I don't think that's something that they would do.
Guys, I saw one mock draft. I can't remember which one it was, but it was respected. It wasn't ESPN, but it was it was somebody who it was a group that I respect. Did not have a quarterback going in the first round, running back going in the first round. And it's possible, I mean, I can't believe that Bijan Robinson is still going to be there at 14 or 15, but it's possible. It could happen.
All right. Well, we got to get out of here, everyone. It's been awesome. Sorry that we did not get to all of the comments and questions, but we're going to be ramping this up a bit here now as we're getting close to the draft. A lot less conjecture, a lot more. Well, there's still a lot of conjecture from NFL teams.
Conjecture never ends.
Yeah, but you're starting to get a little bit of evidence here that you can talk about, and it's just not smoke. So we'll be talking to you guys a lot more here over the next couple of weeks. But one more time, if you are here on YouTube, like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to the page, helps us out a ton. Make sure you go over to shawlocal.com if you haven't seen Hub's first mock draft yet. It's up there right now. We just started our draft preview series. Quarterback, running backs are up. Wide receivers will be dropping here in the next hour or so. After we get off with this, I'll be getting that ready to go to web. Got a lot more content coming your way. Guys, anything else you guys, before we get out of here, anything we missed?
I don't think we missed any. Well, I mean, we may have missed on some of the players and where they're rated. Everybody does. But I think this is the conversation that I'm hearing from Bears fans today. And, I think the good news is that not only do they have 10 picks, does anybody else have 10 picks? I think they have the most picks in this draft, and they certainly have the most high picks, with 4 of them in the top 61. But what happened to be their areas of greatest need are the strongest positions in this draft. I mean, the edge rushers, I don't think wide receiver is a great need anymore, but it's one of the stronger positions, certainly the cornerbacks and certainly the offensive tackles, so in that regard, I find it hard to believe that the Bears aren't going to take somebody who a majority of the fans are going to be the happiest with.
Yeah, they're going to have a chance to get better. And we're excited to keep on covering it these next couple of weeks and appreciate all the questions from the listeners out there. Did we lose Kyle?
I think we did.
We lost Kyle. I'm going to have to end the show. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, following along, and we will let you know when we're going to jump on next time. Everybody have a great day.